Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 120, the old me versus the new me. Things definitely need to change. So welcome to this new month, where we look at where we see ourselves today, how we get real with what needs to go, and what needs to be taken on in order to create sustained change in our lives. So we can continue to become the person I think we were truly meant to be, so we can feel more authentic, empowered, and alive. Things happen, I think, that show us that maybe a change of course is necessary or getting ready to be necessary. I think sometimes we can pinpoint those moments of realization. Other times it's just vague and blurry. We just have a sense or a knowing. But either way, it means it's time we stop and focus on the contrast between where we see ourselves today and where we want to be instead. We begin to face the fact that we're just really not okay. We're content but simply not happy, not energized, not jumping out of bed in the morning. Symptoms might arise that we can no longer tamp down or ignore. We can no longer label them or explain them away as physical or medical issues that seem to, quote unquote, come out of nowhere. So basically this month we're talking about changes that we know we need to make, or perhaps we're ready to want to make, to improve our life. And that can be in whatever areas we choose. Now, having sat with clients over many years, I've noticed along the way certain phenomenon that I'll share with you this month. Doesn't mean you have to put yourself in that particular box by any means, but it may help you become more aware and understanding kind of where you are, or maybe others in your life, maybe your partner, maybe your coworker, your best friend, your sibling. I think there are a few typical ways then that this starts to show up in our life. If we're lucky, like my client said last week, it's all happening at one time for her. And sometimes that can be. So when we talk about change, usually it comes as what we call a life upheaval, big changes, not small ones like rearranging your closet, big ones like big relational changes, big career changes, geographic changes, big changes in your health or your physical appearance or both. So big upheavals, upheaving what has been status quo. A lot of times, and I think the one we're most familiar with is age-related. We can crack all kinds of jokes about midlife crisis, but that is a real developmental piece that we've talked before about on this podcast. For women, sometimes this will hit earlier than it will for men, because men, we socially allow to age gracefully, and we're still getting there with women. So age-related, like milestone birthdays, can create a sense of urgency that maybe there's less time ahead than behind, right? Especially for women, because there is the biological clock thing too. So if she perhaps was thinking about the idea of having a child or having more children, then she can be coming up against a birthday that reminds her that maybe that time is getting close or passing. So age-related, in our 30s, in our 40s, sometimes our 50s. I mean, I think the issues have really always been there, but maybe we could gloss over them and, keep ourselves in situations where no one would necessarily challenge us anyway. Until here comes the birthday, here comes changes in your health. Or maybe the kids are getting older or are grown now. And maybe they don't need you like they used to. So the age-related can often look like a second adolescence, a need for individuation. This is more typical for folks and more typical for women, but not always, who have a tendency to lose themselves in others. Focus on their partner's career, focus on playing a supporting role in that as opposed to going after their own career. Maybe taking care of the kids and focusing on being there for them, which is wonderful. But sometimes when that becomes center stage or the only stage, gosh, it easily can, especially if you have multiple children, then it's easy to lose yourself and lose your dreams and let years go by without even realizing how quick they blow by. And now want it to be for you, finally. Maybe you need to honor yourself. Those things you always wanted to go do, try out, experiment with, try on, become. Maybe finally using your gifts and passions. Maybe these are newly recognized too, because that can happen as well by accident. Looking at your boundaries in your relationships. Maybe refining your values. And now really having that strong desire to actually live them out. And your values may have changed in the past 10 years. As you've gotten older, things change. I think our place in life changes. I think our needs change. I think our desires can change. I think we can become more confident and more on purpose, especially, again, if there are fewer years ahead of us than behind. There's not as much time to just kick the can and avoid the self. That's what the individuation's all about. Finally getting things straight with you. Another way this can happen is having a big life event or two. Loss of a parent or both parents, going through a divorce or a breakup of a relationship that was really important to you. The realization of the reality of your life comes into focus. If you've been through this, you know what I'm talking about. You really take a harsher, more realistic look at what your life is like. Are you happy? Who's around you? I think at those times, we really evaluate the people in our life too. How healthy are my friendships? Could those people really show up for me when it really mattered and it was hard? So looking at substance over form, I think. The big life events also, especially divorce, is going to create sometimes unwanted, unasked for change in your life too, where you don't have a choice. Now you're a single parent, perhaps. Now you have to go back to work or go back to school to get a better job. Maybe you had to move. Fend for yourself for the first time in a long time. Scary as hell, but we can also realize strengths in ourselves that maybe we had pushed away, locked away, or never discovered. Maybe it's just that you're ready to honor what truly matters to you now. Maybe it's your fear of life being too short and not being willing to lose more joy, more time to experience things differently, time to take a risk, do an adventure, things like that. So big life events. Sometimes intertwined with this and sometimes separate is simply exposure to something healthier. Like maybe having to change jobs and you come across and are exposed to new and different people who maybe, let's say, are healthier, they're risk takers, they really like to take care of themselves, maybe they're more creative, things like that, and whatever is outside of your current box. So exposure to something better and healthier for you. Maybe they challenge you in a loving way. Maybe they ask just simple questions because they don't know you yet and know better, and that really triggers your thinking. And it makes you go, oh shit, wow, hadn't looked at that in a while. Sometimes it's a new neighbor, a new friendship that comes along. I don't think those people come along until we're ready, and I don't think we would be triggered by their questions to really look deeply unless we were ready, unless it was time. Doing therapy or coaching, of course, if done right, I would hope lead you to making changes and to really evaluating where you are. I always say to clients, you can't unring the awareness bell. The healthier you get, the healthier you will require, not just want in your life. When we grow, we outgrow. We outgrow old behaviors. We outgrow relationships. We may outgrow jobs because we're becoming more and more in touch with who we are and how to operate, I think, at a higher caliber in life, which is a wonderful thing. I think we can feel more alive. We can have more self-confidence. We can tap into our gifts more, our creativity. We have better relationships. We want to be a part of something larger than ourselves. So the exposure to healthier. And sometimes we can dip our toe in and out of that water for a while. This doesn't always happen overnight. And finally, loss of a job or a relationship, maybe because of your own choices. You know, you get confronted, or worse, you get confronted and left behind or let go, which is really an unfortunate way to hit bottom and find out the hard way. That maybe you need to make some big changes about yourself. Maybe we're told that we're difficult to live with. Maybe our partner has been doing this work we've just been describing for the past 10 minutes, and they just can't stay where you are. They're outgrowing you. I tell people all the time who come in and work on their relationship, I said, you know, here's the deal. If one of you wants to grow and the other doesn't, they're going to have to outgrow you. The relationship's probably not going to survive that. If one of you stands still and crosses your arms and says, I'm fine where I am. So those are some typical ways where life shows up for us via time goes by and we age, big life events happen, or we become exposed to healthier and better. That it triggers us to take a hard look at where we are. Now, typically, we start with the ends and come back to the means. You know, we want maybe a better job, a happier day-to-day, better relationships. We want to look and feel better. Maybe we want to be more successful and make more money, that kind of thing. So we usually start with the outcomes. A lot of times we're looking at other people and looking at what they have, and we want that. And that's totally fine. I think this part of the work does go outside in. You hear me say inside out all the time when we want to give something to another in a relationship. That's inside out. We got to give it to ourselves first. But when we're unhappy and we're unsettled, we look out there. That's okay as long as we don't stay there. That's telling you what you want and what you need. If you're jealous, it's really wonderful information because it's not about them, that's about you. That tells me you haven't been straight with yourself in terms of where you really should be. So we look out there, and then this month we're going to talk about, all right, what's been keeping you from that better job, that healthier relationship, feeling happier? But first, how do you know? How do you know you might be in this space where you're really wanting to make changes? Sometimes you already do know. You've walked all through this and you're pretty clear and you're already starting to work on this. Remember the continuum I talk about all the time. From on one end, total oblivion and denial, right? We just go through our lives kind of maybe in a numb state. Or maybe we are happy, I don't know. but everything's fine. There's there's little frustration. There might be day-to-day frustrations, but not the big stuff. All the way down to the end of the continuum where we've just effing had it, and we're so sick and tired of being sick and tired. So wherever you are is where you are, and that's okay. So how do you know? If you're not already aware, how do you know that you're getting ready to be ready? A big one I see all the time and have for years are anxiety issues. Now, that doesn't mean one is not predisposed biologically to anxiety. Doesn't mean they don't have past trauma or history of anxiety. Of course, you could. In fact, I think you probably do, because if you're at this point in your life and you have not made healthy changes along the way, I think you would have anxiety. But what I'm talking about here is anxiety that increases or finally comes to the fore. Panic attacks out of nowhere for no good reason, not trauma-induced. Anxiety, trouble sleeping, irritability, fears that just don't make any rational sense. I think it points to the need for boundaries that we need to put down somewhere, or maybe everywhere, in our life. We have not set boundaries, and sometimes that's the boundary we need to set with ourselves in terms of looking at our reality, like, aka, I'm not happy. But remember that internal fight that we've talked about. Half of you says, I'm not happy, I'm miserable, this needs to change, and the other half is like, shut up, we're fine. We can't blow shit up here. We're totally fine. Heck, we should be grateful. Look at our wonderful kids and our house, and we have a job, and we have a roof over our head. So that internal fight where you're fighting yourself is often at the core because there's resistance. Life isn't always straightforward. My argument to that is, can't it be both? Can't you be grateful for what you have and also want something more and better? I think you can. Another way you can know is you're becoming bored, irritable others around you. You find yourself slacking off, lacking motivation. You feel stuck. You feel frustrated. All of a sudden, everything at work is starting to piss you off. Everything at home feels frustrating. Nothing feels good enough outside of you right now. Sometimes a mild depression also can play a part here, or maybe you're coming out of it. What I mean by that is maybe you've been mildly depressed for years, but functioning and slapping a smile on your face, saying you're fine. And you're coming out of that depression with a little bit of anger. So there's lots of discomfort in your life, too, is another way. Things are blowing up all around you. Nothing seems to be working like it used to. Things are perhaps changing outside of you. You feel frustrated. You feel restless. Maybe even lashing out a little bit, feeling a little bit beat up by life. Like, why is this happening to me? This isn't fair. What I always talk about is friction makes fire. And all of a sudden, we're frustrated with things that were fine a year ago, 2 years ago. Sometimes it means we're outgrowing, and growing pains hurt. And we have to be frustrated and sick and tired of what is before, obviously, we can let go and be ready, like really psychologically ready for something new. So I always say that friction's making a fire, putting it under your butt to give you the courage to forge ahead and to embrace change, which those of you who love to have control, that's scary because that's the unknown. So lots of discomfort. Maybe you find yourself distracted. You daydream more. You're comparing yourself a lot to others who seem freer. They seem happier, maybe more successful. In essence, you're just so ready to rewrite your story. You're ready. You're done. Or you're getting ready to be done. I think we talk a lot of talk before we walk. And that's okay. encourage clients not to be too hard on themselves, because they'll often say, Mary, you must be so sick of me bringing this up and I haven't done anything yet. I said, you're getting ready. The more you talk about this, the more real you make it. And the more you and I talk about it, the more we can talk about how realistically you need to do that. And what is the cost if you don't make that change? And why that change is possible? And why making those changes makes more sense and reflects who you really are on the inside. Why those changes need to happen for you to be healthier and happier. Why those in your life who should be there, my gosh, would love this and eventually embrace it. Because guess what? They're going to benefit tenfold. When we change, when we get healthier, the only people who don't like that are the people who are toxic and so unwilling to let us be free, to be happy, because they're miserable. That's the short story on that. There's much more to it clinically, of course. So there are two types of changes that I think are intertwined, interdependent, sometimes dependent upon each other. So there's the external changes that I've kind of been mentioning already. Maybe changing your career, changing where you live, changing how you live. Maybe you go vegan. Maybe you get healthier. Relationships, changing our relationship with people in our life or the people in our relationships. All kinds of external changes, making more money, going back to school, hanging out with different people, all of those external things. But then there's the internal ones that I think are more long-standing and more important. And we're going to get into more of this next episode, but an overview would be looking at your self-confidence, looking at your assertiveness, maybe a shame-based upbringing that you need to heal and work through. Maybe there's unresolved trauma back there that's still impacting you. Maybe you've been settling for less than what you need and deserve, both in career and relationships. Maybe there's controlling behaviors that you struggle with and you're accompanying anxiety with that. Maybe you take care of everyone else and don't take good enough care of yourself. Maybe you feel disempowered, victimized, beat up, manipulated. Maybe you haven't done the big grief work yet. Maybe you haven't forgiven yourself. And finally, maybe you haven't really taken responsibility for your own happiness up until now, like really owning your choices. So those are some of the internal things that I think once we really start to work on, we organically make changes on the outside. However, I do believe, just like going and getting a makeover, you can feel more confident when you look better. You can feel more confident when you're given a raise. That can help you have, I think, the motivation and the courage, more courage, to then do the deeper, harder work on the inside. What I do know is we can't do this work alone. So grab a coach. If you need some therapy, grab a therapist. Grab some healthy friends. Grab a support group. You can't do this alone. If it were this easy, you would have already done it by yourself. But it is powerful, life-changing change. It's an amazing journey that I love to be a part of when my clients are walking through it. I try to give them as much knowledge as I have, encouragement and support, accountability, and a soft place to land when it gets hard. So today we talked about how when we reach that point in our adult lives, when we get serious about needing things to be different, maybe we're hitting an age milestone, a big change or loss is going on, or we simply can no longer ignore the symptoms that show us that things just aren't okay anymore. So all month, we're going to be diving into this topic to give you a chance to take a moment and reflect upon where you might be today and where you want to go. Thank you so much for joining me today. May you stay healthy, be reflective this week, honor your truth, and love someone this week. Be sure to check the show notes at ownitpowercast.com if you don't get the newsletter already. And whatever bonus downloads for the episodes are in there. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you could begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.